Okay, so welcome to the Node.js Community N-API Team meeting for August 9th, 2018. We're just going to look at our current milestone and then I think do some milestone planning for the next one. So looking at milestone 10, let me start by sharing my screen there. So the first thing we have is SQLite and N-API port, so resolve Mac issue. I think that we're past a Mac specific issue, but there was some issue around types and stuff. I believe Anisha submitted a PR, which I just, sorry, haven't had a chance to look at. So that's on my plate to look at that as the next step on that front. Investigate use of pre-build with N-API. So I think, Jim, you've made some progress on that one.
Yeah, I've made good progress. I've got all of the technical issues resolved. I'm able to build and upload and download. So it's really good. I appreciate your feedback on the issues. So I will make that change and use just N-API instead of Node-NPI for the runtime label. That will make the package names consistent with what we're doing for Node pre-JIP.
Yeah, I think based on your suggestion, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so I appreciate your feedback on that, you and Gabriel. And so I just need to do the test, need to make sure the CI is working correctly and the documentation, and then put in a PR. So my objective is to have that PR in before we meet next week.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Good work.
It's really nice. It's a really clean implementation. It much cleaner than the Node pre-JIP work. So I feel very good about it.
Okay, awesome. That's great. And then I think like a blog on maybe using it with an API or something afterwards would be a good publicity as well. So
yeah, okay, very good.
Okay, that's good. Next one is burn down list of issues in Node repo and issues raised by module owners. Anything people want to bring up or discuss this week on that front?
It's kind of a non-direct thing. Like there was this issue brought up once where which caused us to remove the function template stuff and replace it with just creating functions. Mm-hmm. And so one of the side effects of that is that in Node add-on API, this results in that leak, right? Where Node add-on API creates this data on the heap and associates it with each function, and which is kind of okay-ish if you're dealing with bindings, but if you're dealing with function factories, that turns into a leak.
Yep.
And so I spoke to Jason. What am I saying to Jason?
Jason, yes.
Sorry about that, guys.
You parsed him, right?
Yeah, I parsed it right, but I said it wrong. Anyway, so I spoke to Jason at Node Summit, and he said that there's no other choice but to write another API, which will allow us to basically call like a finalizer callback for this data. After I've actually been looking at it since then, and I think the best way to do this would be to write one that behaves exactly like N-API wrap, except it doesn't use up the private slot, because this is the kind of data that doesn't need to be retrieved from the object later on. Mm-hmm. And so basically it's like, let me know when you die. That's what we need. And by the way, here's some data. You may free it, you may not, but the bottom line is I need to know when the object dies.
Yep.
So I'm working on that, and I'm calling it N-API add finalizer. And internally, it's basically a copy of N-API wrap. So I moved N-API wrap to V8 impl, and I added like a template parameter for whether you want to store it anonymously or not.
So it actually requires an addition to N-API itself?
Yes, it does. There is no other solution. And Node add-on API would be the first user of this, but it is not Node API that originally pointed to the problem, but another issue.
So it's okay. So it's like it's not that Node add-on API was doing. So basically, using the current existing NAPI calls, you can't create a function. Even forget Node add-on API, you can't just use NAPI and create a function that won't leak.
Yes, you can if you NAPI wrap. But if you NAPI wrap, then you use up the wrap slot. And so you can't wrap anything else with that. So it can be done. And it can also be done in Node add-on API by using NAPI wrap. But then we create a distinction between objects which are wrapped using just plain NAPI and objects which are wrapped using Node add-on API.
Okay, so you can do it, but it doesn't sound like it's intuitive.
It is. I mean, NAPI wrap is a fully functioning, well-defined API, but you're basically, but it's like a one-off thing, right? Once you've wrapped something, that's it. You know.
I guess you're basically saying you wrap the object to, right? You're wrapping your but even like, I guess the thing is, if you're creating a function that you don't even want to be used as a JavaScript object, you still have to bind it to a JavaScript object so that you know when to free things.
No. The function is itself a JavaScript object. So if we didn't make any additions to an API, you could say NAPI create function. Mm-hmm. It returns an NAPI value that is a function that is also an object, because functions are objects, right?
Right.
And then you pass the result of NAPI create function to NAPI wrap, and you're done.
Right, because wrap has a destructor.
Exactly. So you could do it that way, and in fact, it's a fairly strong argument for doing it this way, and therefore not making an API addition, because functions are not normally things that you wrap. Objects, which are instances created from constructors, yes, those things you do wrap very often.
Right.
But functions you don't. However, since I mean, conceptually, since functions are objects themselves, it is conceivable that it might get treated as an object and wrapped. So you know, we could go another way here, which is to change the documentation and say that if you need the data associated with a function to be deleted along with the function, then just call NAPI wrap.
Right.
Pass the function to NAPI wrap. However, you cannot use it for anything else then. So if you have two modules and one treats the function as an object and tries to wrap it, that would throw a NAPI invalid art.
Right, but okay, so if you write your thing and you know that this function you created is going to be wrapped, like I'm just trying to think of when it would actually be a problem. So if you're only wrapping the function so that you get it to be cleaned up,
yeah,
then if you actually want it to be wrapped and used as an object,
yeah,
you do that. Well, no, you only wrap it for that purpose, and then you don't need to wrap it for the cleanup purpose because you get that for free.
No. You cannot call NAPI wrap twice on the same object.
Well, no, but I guess I'm probably not understanding the subtlety here. But what I'm saying is you wouldn't call wrap for the cleanup purposes, because you're actually wrapping it for a real world reason.
Oh, okay, but there could be two reasons for wrapping. One is that, okay, some native data needs to be associated with this function, and two, the function itself was created by a function factory rather than a binding. So if you create, like, if you have a function factory, then you're using the same native function but for different reasons. So it needs to have one kind of context so that it can behave differently depending on when it was created, and it needs another kind of context for unwrapping and then doing stuff internally.
Right, but then that's back to my original thing, is that if you're wrapping it, you know, wrap as described is not meant to be used in the way that it's being used, right? Like it's you sort of have to use wrap in a way, like either just wrapping it gets you the freeing of data, the function itself, for free, or you have to do something special to say, okay, I'm wrapping it, but I'm passing in the extra data in a particular way so that in the end that does the right thing. In which case you're sort of, working around, you're saying, well, by passing in, say, the extra data pointer as the pointer to the native function, you're getting I'm sort of coming from, like, either in the one case you're sort of using wrap in a way it wasn't intended to,
In which case, like in
the case where it's a function, you just want the function to be freed, the memory to be freed.
Yes. That I mean, the thing is, yes, it's an unusual use case, but we have the following arguments working in favor of not adding a new API, and that is functions aren't normally wrapped. Right. Plain JavaScript objects or instances of constructors, those are usually wrapped. Right. So in that sense, they shouldn't overlap, but of course there are crazy use cases. Now, a second point that speaks in favor of not adding a new N-API is that the finalizer has a hint parameter. So you could actually do two things. You could N-API wrap for the purposes of cleaning up some data associated with the function. And then if you need to wrap again, you could N-API unwrap, get that data, remove wrap, and then add a new wrap where the cleanup data is the data and the actual wrap data is the hint. And so you do kind of have two slots in one, but then you've used up the hint parameter, which has different semantics. The hint is just there just in case you need an extra pointer, and now you've used up the extra pointer. So right. Either way, you're using up something that we didn't intend. But the question is this a corner enough case so that we can just go ahead and do that because it's possible?
Yeah, I mean it's like in my mind it comes down to like if I assume you have to wrap in a very specific way, right? Like you don't just wrap the object, you have to wrap the function and you have to pass in something as the extra data or something that in particular.
Yes. I mean, the wrapping is the data and a hint. So it takes two void stars and then it gives them back to you in the finalizer.
Right. But you have to consume, say, the data to get the cleanup at the function, right?
How do you mean consume the data?
Well, I guess what I not looking at the code in front of me, I'm trying to understand what is it that having. So say I do an object wrap, right?
Yes.
I just want to do my regular object wrap, but I also want the function to be cleaned up because it happens to be a function.
Yes.
What do I do that's different from just a normal wrapping an object in the first place?
Well, basically, you would have to do a hint as well as the data. You could do it that way.
Right, but okay, so that's what I'm getting at. So you actually have to pass a pointer to something for the cleanup part.
Yes, you do.
And in the object wrap case, you would want that pointer to be something else.
Yes, exactly. And another crucial difference is that in the cleanup case, you will never want to retrieve that pointer again later on using like N-API unwrap.
Sure, but okay, so here's the other question. That pointer you pass in, do we automatically free it or anything like that? Or is it?
No.
No, that's what I figured. Yeah. So you could make that a pointer to a structure that has two pieces of data, right?
Yes, you could. But then that will work for applications, like for add-ons. But for frameworks, that will not work. So for example, in the case of Node add-on API, if Node add-on API were to use this data parameter, then it could create the structure internally, but then you could only unwrap objects with Node add-on API that were wrapped with Node add-on API, because you would need to unpack that structure and return the payload to the person who wrote the code using Node add-on API. Now, if you pass that object to another module that was written in plain N-API, then that object would not contain the expected pointer, but would contain a pointer to a structure that is defined internally inside Node add-on API.
Right. So you'd have to know that and
exactly. Yes.
That. That's not terrible, is it?
Well, it has some unexpected semantics. So because you would expect like we say Node add-on API is nothing but sugar, but this breaks that promise. It's not nothing but sugar because it adds this stuff.
Well, no, because you're right. It adds a little bit of functionality, but it's structuring. Yeah, I don't know if it's. have to think more, because it's the balance between new API versus not, right?
Yeah. And since we are dealing with functions, you could argue that it would fit in this, and you could even argue that for a function, it's probably okay to use up the wrap slot for cleanup purposes, because like I said, functions are almost never wrapped. It's the instances that are wrapped.
Yeah, although, as soon as you say that, somebody will want to wrap a function.
Exactly,
because it's just an object like anything else. So
okay, but we can defer this addition to that point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I guess what we really, so there's now a function that says, I forget, I have to go look, but there's like a function that says create a new function, right?
Yes.
So what
function accepts a void star and without taking a finalizer and a hint. That's the fundamental flaw, is that when you create a new function, you can pass in a void star, but you cannot also pass in a finalizer and a hint so that void star may be cleaned up when the function is garbage.
And that void star is used by Node add-on API.
Yes, exactly. It's used with a heap allocated structure is the big problem.
Right.
And so that will never be free.
Sure. Yes. Okay. So I don't know. I kind of think that, what we should have done is for that function had had the signature have those extra fields. So should we just add a new N-API function which extends the current signature to include those?
That was my starting point. But basically the reason why I ended up with this wrap thing is because I realized that doing it specifically for a function is not enough, because then you need to do it for an API defined class, and then you need to do it for an API defined properties, because a property descriptor can also be a function, right? And so and people need to change their code anyway to take advantage of this.
Do they already take void stars, those other things?
Yes, they do. Yes, the NAPI defined properties, if you pass in a NAPI callback, it also accepts a void star. So the structure of a NAPI property descriptor satisfies all the parameters for NAPI create function, and as such also has the shortcoming where you cannot add a NAPI like a NAPI finalize callback into the structure. We didn't leave room for an NAPI finalize callback in the NAPI property descriptor structure.
Right. So
we didn't in NAPI create function.
So there's a couple places where there's no void star.
Exactly. So that's why the best solution would be to add a new API which will allow users to retrofit the finalizer onto all of these use cases with a second N-API call, rather than creating a version of that, because then we'd have to copy a bunch of stuff over, and it's very difficult to factor it out, especially in NAPI defined class. NAPI defined class does a lot of things. And so you cannot simply, write a new API which calls the old API and does one other thing, because then you have to iterate over all the properties again, check which ones were functions, retrieve the JavaScript function that resulted from iterating over those properties in the first place, and then attach the finalizer. And there's another problem. If you have getters and setters, you need two finalizers, one for the getter, one for the setter, because they could both be dynamic. So that's why the best solution would be to just add a new API, because all your values are available to you. The getters are available, the setters are available as NAPI values. And so you just make a second call, you pass in whatever NAPI value was the result of the first call, and then you attach your finalizer. Which implementationally is exactly the same as doing a NAPI wrap, except you don't assign a private property a private static property on the object.
Sure. And then
so that slot remains pristine.
Sure. I mean, I guess that makes sense. It seems ugly. I really wish that everywhere we had a void star, we'd had the stuff to clean them up.
Exactly. But as a result, this is as clean as it's going to get, given our initial oversight.
And I guess, but I'd go back to how often is it that every place we're going to see a call to this finalizer, or do most of the time
no. Actually, no. It's only going to be used for these function factories. because most often, like in the case of bindings, most often this data is null because you have one function, one native function for one JavaScript binding. The only time it's not null is if you create functions on the fly, and we've had issues where people created functions on the fly. So because then, you know, if you create a function on the fly, obviously it's going to be the same. It's going to be the same native function. You cannot create native functions on the fly except with great difficulty. So that's when you do this. Like, for example, if you have a C API which accepts a function pointer, then you almost always have to, you know, create this kind of data, you know, and you have to create a JavaScript function which behaves differently depending on which callback it is.
Right.
So yeah, that's basically it. Or the other use case is if you need to provide a callback into JavaScript, and you need to provide that repeatedly for different reasons. Then you need to know, you know, for which HTTP connection did I give this callback? You know, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And so that's when you start having this data.
Okay. Well, it does sound like, I guess, a single extra function covers all of the use cases.
Yeah. Yeah, and it leaves everything intact that we already have.
And using object wrap just doesn't sound like the right long-term solution.
No, exactly. Yeah. It's a stretch, and I don't have enough foresight to know whether that stretch would be enough. You know, like if we just went ahead and said, listen, if you're doing function factories, then just use N-API wrap to free the data afterwards. But be aware that if you do that, you cannot use N-API wrap again for other reasons. That may well be enough because we're dealing with functions, not with objects. But the clean solution, and Jason saw this immediately, was to just add the API. Like he just reacted off the cuff saying, okay, yeah, then we clearly need a new API. So, you know, and he's coming from kind of an outside perspective, having not been actively involved in a while. So that's kind of a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I think it's much more intuitive, right? Like, I don't see how using wrap is an intuitive solution, right?
Yeah, and the name is misleading too, because you're not really wrapping the function. You know, all you need to know is like when it's going to be garbage collected. You don't really care to wrap anything in it.
Right. Okay. Well, I guess that makes sense. I guess the challenge will be, you know, getting it back to older releases. I guess not 8, but 6.
Yeah. It creates another one of these. I don't know what to call it. This sort of juggle where you need to make sure that everything supports it and so forth. Because, you know, even if we implement this and even if the PR lands tomorrow, you know, even if we backport it and all those PRs land tomorrow, we cannot simply update Node add-on API and make use of it, because, you know, if you build against 6.14.2, which we claim has an API, then it doesn't have this. So you know, this leak will only be fixed when, you know, when every supported version of Node has this. So
yeah,
it's a bit of a problem.
Yeah, and yes.
Oh, and another aspect here, which is also a lesson learned from Node add-on API, is that this extra sort of wrapping, it not only makes Node add-on API unintuitive by using up this wrap slot if we weren't to implement this API, but any other in-between frameworks, right? So Node add-on API adds another level of indirection when it comes to calling a native function from JavaScript, right? Because it also has this callback data, and it also retrieves that, and then it calls the N-API, and the N-API retrieves its own callback data, and then it finally calls the native function. Right. So if there are any other frameworks which place like an in-between sort of function signature massaging layer, like a thunking layer basically, then those two will be faced with this problem in that they cannot add their own data because they would be using up the wrap slot.
Right. Well, yeah, I guess we'll still have to think, like, you know, does it make sense in Node add-on API to say, well, for version 6, if you're building against that, maybe we use wrap behind the scenes, and in 10 we would use the newer one.
Yeah, because because Node add-on API is source compatible only anyway. So well, no, it's not. That's not true.
They would work in both cases, right? Like, in one case you have the limitation what you just described, that you've used up the wrap, right?
Yes.
But in the next case, you have the it's sort of like it's worth considering as a transition. Like, okay, yes, there's the shortcoming, but we know that it's a shortcoming.
Yeah, exactly.
But you don't have but is that shortcoming worse than having a memory leak? Maybe not, right?
Yeah.
But then in the later versions, when once 6 goes away and people recompile, and if they don't have to recompile, then they don't have the problem. If they do recompile, then they're writing new code, then there's less likelihood that they're going to be impacted by it.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So that may be a way forward. Is like, okay, it's for now, until we get the new API, we consume it, and maybe we need some doc that warns you about that. But then later on, there's actually a good solution.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That totally makes sense. Okay. So then the action points for me are to PR this new API, and to change Node add-on API to use N-API wrap, and to document all this, including adding warnings about the shortcomings, which will go away. Okay.
Yeah, I think we should write up the warnings about the shortcomings, and then we can decide, is it worth doing that or leaving the leak for now, right?
Right.
Like, is there any way to work?
Well, okay, but if there's a leak, then there is no shortcoming, right?
Well, I guess well, because you said PR N-API Node add-on API, right? If we actually build it into the wrapper, then we could fix the leak so people don't get it, but we've consumed the slot.
Yes.
If there's a way actually to say, using Node add-on API, here's a way to wrap it yourself.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Okay, then.
So I think that would be the way to go, actually, then, is to, there's the new one. So in the newest version where the new API is available, Node add-on API just does what you need, right?
Okay.
But we also document that here's how you could use the wrap through Node add-on API in the short term to work around your leak.
Yes. Right. Funny thing is, though, if people use this and they do the wrapping themselves, then eventually it would have to be a very, very hard requirement to actually use the new API, because everybody will already have solved their cleanup problems using wrap.
Right, until there's a problem, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there would have, but what I'm saying is there would have to be a very, very hard boundary at that point, because only if it's impossible to use N-API wrap as a workaround, only then will there be a definite need for the new API. So that's why I was saying earlier, like, N-API wrap may just be a sufficient solution.
Right. But it seems to me that we should get the API in, because otherwise we get into all these problems of what do you do going forward, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So it still seems to me that it's like, unless and then it's like, okay, as a workaround, because there's no other choice, here's what you could do today, right?
Yes.
I think that's the combination of those two things, then hopefully put us in a good place in the future, and as years tick off, and older versions go away, or we backport things, then it also goes away.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if we add this API, then we will have recovered from our oversight for sure.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Okay.
No, that was good. Good discussion. Any other on those two? The burn down list of issues raised, or no? Okay. Documentation push. I know, Nicola, you've been working on that. You want to give an update?
I just addressed the suggestion made by Gabriel yesterday, and now I'm writing object wrap.
Okay, so I'm going to, these are done since I'm pretty sure these are all done. So, okay, so that's good. We're making progress there. I think that's what we had in the current milestone. So let's flip over to the issue where we were talking about content for the next milestone. We have just a few more things to finish off on those, but it sounds like we're making good progress. So I guess, Nick, you were saying we should merge add-on examples and node add-on examples. I think that's definitely a good one. Does everybody else agree?
Yeah, Gabriel opened this issue, and
there's kind of a blocker though in that Node add-on examples does not accept pull requests because it's an archived repo.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So is it archived because why did we ever figure out why it was archived?
I don't believe so.
So because there's two things. Like either it's archived because like somebody looked at it and said, well, ABI stable node on examples should be the one, or there was some other reason, right?
Yeah, I think we need to ask around for this.
So I think we want to at least figure that out, because if it's archived, but there was a thing that said, oh, but the current version of all these is being maintained in ABI stable node add-on examples, we'd be done, right?
No, I don't believe that was it. It was archived earlier than ABI stable node add-on examples even existed.
Okay, so but we should,
I believe.
Right, we might want to figure that out then, and then say, like, if we could understand the context around that, because we do want to actively continue to have examples. And we just need one place probably where it's obvious. And if nothing else, if we can make that node add-on examples point to ours, that's great, or whatever else. But yeah, we probably just need to ask around. So, but I think that making that one of our goals for the next milestone makes sense, to figure out whatever the story is on that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the README, but there's nothing that stands out.
Okay, so I see the other one is expand test suite, right? So I think, Nikolai, you had used the examples from.
Yeah. Maybe we can use the examples in our test suite.
Right. So I like that. So I think we definitely need to expand our test suite because we don't have full coverage yet. And starting by something we already have is a good idea to be able to do that more easily. So.
Okay.
So I think adding that is like another one. I just put a bullet, we'll be expand the test suite, and we can start by using the examples in the test suite. Let's see. And then the GitHub banner badge. Right. So I think that's a good idea as well, like a GitHub badge for an API. We just need to figure out how you do that. Does anybody have any experience with badges?
No.
Well, only adding existing ones, not creating new ones.
Okay. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. I put it in the wrong place. But I think that's a good idea, and like it's we'll just need, once we get to milestone 11, we'll figure out a volunteer to understand how you make them, and I doubt that it's all that hard because we've made them for some other things. I might actually even be able to ask somebody who's made one, or I think who's made one, and sounds good. Okay, so we got focus on async worker. So that definitely, I think that's good. Continue focus on bringing down the issues. Evangelism. So we do have to prepare for JS Interactive. Breakout session at the Collaborator Summit. So one thing I will highlight is there was an issue opened. They're going to have like a community corner. So there is the possibility to submit some ideas there for talks. So if you guys have any suggestions or thoughts on things there, that would be good to think about. right? So we want to do this breakout. I think
What is the format of these breakout sessions?
In the email. So you mean this breakout session?
Yeah.
So this one is the Collaborator Summit. It's basically, a group of interested people break out into a separate room and you go through the topic and have a discussion. So those are sometimes they've been somebody puts a presentation up front. Sometimes they're like an intro followed by discussion. They're meant to be more along of sort of a working session kind of thing.
Well, because our workshop kind of fits that, is what I'm thinking. Like maybe not 100%, but because it is an intro, and it can get hands-on.
Yeah, Jim's suggestion is we do a little bit more about the code structure, about how to get into the core code, like the core code and Node add-on API code.
What
for people who want to contribute.
Oh, contribute. Okay.
Yeah, these are for contributors, right? Since it's a collaborator summit, these are kind of people who are already contributing to core, to the project. So maybe helping them understand how to contribute to an API would be a good thing, right?
Yes.
So I don't think you were at the last call, but I was even thinking that, you might volunteer to put something like that together. Or we could do it together, right? It's basically here are the structure of the files, where you find them, and then, generally how we've been working to add things.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll volunteer the two of us to put that together. And I don't think it needs to be more than like 10, 15-minute kind of intro. And then, we have time to talk with people if they have questions, answers, whatever, but we can kind of sense that as we see who shows interest when we get a little bit closer.
Sure.
And we can think of other topics too. Like if it's often a work group gets together, so we can use it as hey, we're face-to-face time.
Mm-hmm.
So we can use it as that week's our meeting. We can basically say if we have any longer term planning we want to do, or there's any things that we want to do that we think doing face-to-face would be easier than what we do on the call like this. We should schedule those in. And then also do some of this other stuff that's kind of like a way to pull new people in as well.
Gotcha.
But the thing I was mentioning is that they're having this Node.js Community Corner, which is separate from this, which is on during the main 2 days. And they're basically saying, it's a way to get more Node-focused content into the project, because there was, a few comments that there wasn't quite enough. And so there's like 30-minute, 15-minute, or 10-minute talks, I think. It's not clear to me the exact format, but in the issue, which here I'll find the issue and paste it into the chat. In that issue, there's some discussion about what that might look like. Let's see. Right here. So it's just another opportunity for us to, talk to people about or propose talking about an API and stuff. Where's chat? There's chat. So any other things that people think we should have in the next milestone? The list we have there is pretty good and is a sizable enough chunk for a milestone.
No.
We might come up with something else on the evangelism side as we go through, but I think that's, to my mind, unless anybody else has things we should add, that's probably a good start.
Yep.
Okay, so I think we'll leave it at milestone 10 for at least next week. And then, once we close out the last couple of issues, we can move on to focusing on 11.
Okay.
Sounds good. I'm heads up, I'm away next week, so I won't make the meeting. I don't know. I guess hopefully Arunish or we still haven't figured out how to let everybody hold the Zoom meetings. So maybe you can fall back to the Hangouts for that week.
Yeah, probably can.
We have a volunteer to chair next week.
Sure, I can probably go through the issues.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay. Any other topics for this week?
Nope.
No.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Good to see the progress that's being made, and we'll talk to you. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks, but have a good chat in next week.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, see you guys.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.